In 2020, in just one morning, 1.9 billion euros, more than $2 billion, vanished. Not because of hackers, not because of war, but because it never existed. The company behind this scandal was Wirecard, once the pride of Germany, a so-called tech unicorn, hailed as the PayPal of Europe. They promised to change the way the world pays. Banks trusted them, investors worshipped them, and the media praised them as proof that Europe could finally stand shoulder to shoulder with Silicon Valley. But when a journalist named Dan McCrum began asking one simple question, where exactly did all those mysterious revenues from Asia come from? The billion-dollar machine began to crack. What he uncovered wasn't just accounting fraud, it was a whole system of power, where money, reputation, and trust were used as weapons to silence the truth. This isn't just a story about a company's downfall. It's a story about how the entire world can believe in a lie simply because it sounds right. In this video, you'll see why smart investors never chase rumors, never fall for promises, and always ask the right question. Because sometimes one question at the right moment can save your entire fortune. And if you want to learn how to invest with logic instead of emotion, hit like and subscribe, because today's story will show you that the most dangerous thing in the market isn't fraud, it's blind faith. A lesson from the past to help you stay sharp and make smarter investment decisions in the future. Part 1. Wirecard, the German tech dream. Germany has always been a nation defined by precision. From BMW engines to Junghans watches, Germans believe in numbers, in process, in perfect order. But there was one thing that troubled them for years. While America had Google, Amazon, and PayPal, Germany, the largest economy in Europe, had no global tech star of its own. Then, in the early 2000s, as the world entered the age of electronic payments, a small company called Wirecard emerged in Munich. At first, they were just a modest startup processing online payments for gaming and adult entertainment websites, a quiet, overlooked niche. But soon they grew fast, expanding into e-commerce and cross-border payments. And before long, people started calling them the PayPal of Europe. Sounds exciting, doesn't it? A young, ambitious company leading the digital wave, branded as the face of Germany 4.0. The media celebrated them. The government lifted them up as a symbol of national pride. And when Wirecard went public, its stock price skyrocketed, multiplying many times over, making everyone believe that this was the future Europe had been waiting for. The numbers looked flawless. Revenue soared, profits exploded, and every new acquisition abroad was promoted as proof of the company's global vision. But there was one detail almost everyone missed. All those dazzling results came from their so-called partners in Asia, companies no one had ever heard of and that no one had actually verified. From time to time, a few independent analysts raised concerns. They said something about Wirecard's financial reports doesn't add up. But instead of listening, the market pushed back and laughed. You just don't understand their business model. You're jealous of their success. You're shorting the stock for profit. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Because every time a new bubble forms, from Enron to Theranos, from FTX to meme stocks, people always say the same things. We love growth so much that we stop seeing how it's quietly consuming the truth. It's like watching a movie that's too good and convincing ourselves that maybe, just maybe, it's all real. But success can't be measured only by the stock price. It must be measured by the honesty of the model and the integrity of the people behind it. Wirecard became the pride of Germany not just because they were smart, but because the entire nation wanted to believe they were. Because behind every financial bubble lies a collective desire, polished and inflated by hope. Finally, we have one of our own. And that belief became a shield. No one asked questions anymore. No auditor dared to go against the market's euphoria. And as the truth grew darker, Wirecard turned from a symbol of German innovation into proof of how blind faith can turn a lie into national pride. The lesson for investors is crystal clear. The market always falls in love with beautiful stories, but real value often hides in the ugly details that few want to see. Because in the world of investing, what costs us the most isn't someone else's fraud, it's our own unverified belief. Part 2. The first signs of fraud. Every downfall begins with something small. A number that doesn't match, an explanation that doesn't make sense, or something simply too good to be true. For Wirecard, the first warning signs appeared around 2015. A small group of financial journalists at the Financial Times began noticing something strange in the company's reports. The massive profits seemed to come from places no one really knew: the Philippines, Dubai, Singapore. But when they visited the addresses of these so-called strategic partners, they found nothing more than empty offices or tiny storefronts tucked in quiet neighborhoods. Sound familiar? That's how fraudsters build castles out of paper, creating fake revenues from companies that don't even exist. But back then, no one wanted to listen. Wirecard was Germany's shining star. Its stock price was soaring, investors were making money, and the media couldn't stop cheering. Who would want to believe that the German tech dream might be a scam? Then came a journalist named Dan McCrum. He wasn't the kind who chased sensational headlines. He simply saw something that didn't add up and refused to let it go. Year after year, McCrum dug through reports, receipts, and hidden clues. He spoke to former employees, suppliers, even hackers, anyone who could verify the transactions Wirecard claimed to have had. And what he discovered shocked the world. A huge portion of Wirecard's profits came from third-party partners in Asia, companies supposedly holding billions of euros in cash on Wirecard's behalf. But no one had ever seen that money. No transfer records, no independent bank confirmations. When the Financial Times published their investigation, Wirecard didn't respond with transparency. They fought back. They hired lawyers, threatened lawsuits, and accused the FT of market manipulation. Investors rushed to defend the company. "Don't believe the media, they're just trying to tank the stock," they said. And in that exact moment, the con was already halfway complete. Because in every great financial fraud, the moment truth is attacked, the crowd chooses illusion, because illusion feels safer. McCrum was followed, hacked, and even accused of criminal activity in Germany. But he kept going, because people like him understand one timeless truth. If a company is too complex to understand, too big to question, that's exactly when you should start doubting it. The real lesson for investors isn't hidden in the numbers. It's in how people react when questions are raised. A truly transparent business can always prove the truth. Only liars need PR campaigns, lawyers, and threats to protect their image. Wirecard didn't collapse because it ran out of money. It collapsed because it got too comfortable hiding the truth behind people's trust. And if you've invested long enough, remember this: not every fraudster looks like a criminal. Sometimes they wear the suit of a successful entrepreneur, speak the language of ambition, and make the whole world believe they're changing the future. Part 3. The battle between truth and power. When a lie is repeated long enough, it starts to look like the truth. And when that lie is backed by billions of dollars, politicians, banks, and national pride, telling the truth can make you the enemy of the entire world. That's exactly what Dan McCrum faced. When the Financial Times published its first investigation into Wirecard, instead of being praised for exposing corruption, McCrum was branded a traitor, a pawn of American hedge funds trying to destroy a German company. Domestic media attacked him, and the German financial regulator, BaFin, didn't investigate Wirecard, they investigated the Financial Times. A bitter irony. The liar was protected, and the truth-teller was hunted. Major banks profiting from Wirecard's soaring stocks stayed silent. Politicians who once took smiling photos with CEO Marcus Braun, the man hailed as Europe's tech visionary, quickly chose the side of power. And investors kept buying, because the stock kept rising and the market kept cheering. McCrum later said that for nearly 2 years he lived in fear. His phone was tapped, his emails hacked. Once he even received an anonymous message: "If you keep going, we'll make you disappear." But McCrum didn't stop, because some truths, if left unsaid, will bury everything, not just money, but the very trust that holds the financial system together. Behind the scenes, he and a small group of Financial Times colleagues kept digging, piece by piece. They interviewed former employees in Singapore, checked invoices, traced bank accounts, and slowly uncovered a terrifying reality. Wirecard's entire Asian revenue was fake. Meanwhile, CEO Marcus Braun still walked on stage in his crisp suit, speaking of innovation, trust, and the future of global payments. Thousands still believed. The stock kept rising, and those who dared to question were simply pushed aside. Part 4. The Day the Empire Fell. In June 2020, Germany woke up to a headline no one could believe. Wirecard, the pride of European technology, announced it couldn't find 1.9 billion euros in its bank accounts. A staggering number, gone, as if it had never existed. Within hours, panic swept through the markets. Wirecard's stock, once a symbol of national pride, went into freefall. Those who had once called Marcus Braun the Elon Musk of Germany suddenly went silent. Banks, investors, and politicians all pulled away as if they had never even known the company. It was the day trust shattered. Wirecard employees, who truly believed they were building something that would change the world, stood in disbelief as police surrounded their headquarters. Marcus Braun was arrested that very night. Jan Marsalek, the man behind the murky offshore deals, vanished as if into thin air. What remained was an empty space on the balance sheet, 1.9 billion euros on paper, and millions of investors left with nothing. Dan McCrum later described how he felt when the news broke. "I wasn't happy. I just felt empty. Because the worst part isn't that they fooled us, it's that we let it happen." Wirecard's collapse wasn't just the downfall of a company. It was a crack in Europe's financial foundation, a reminder of how fragile the system becomes when trust replaces verification. BaFin, the same regulator that once defended Wirecard, was now accused of negligence and corruption. Ernst & Young, the auditors who for years had signed off Wirecard's accounts as completely accurate, became symbols of blindness, or worse, complicity. The market began asking a painful question. If a company like Wirecard could fake its success for more than a decade, how many other empires are built on illusions? That question isn't just for German investors. It's for all of us. Every time we believe something too good to be true, every time we silence our doubts because everyone else is investing, we hand over not just our money, but our judgment to those who tell better stories than the truth. When Wirecard collapsed, billions vanished, but something even more valuable was lost: the crowd's blind faith. And in that moment, McCrum voiced the greatest lesson of all. Markets don't collapse because of a lack of information. They collapse because people have the information and refuse to believe it. For investors, that lesson is simple and painful. Never let reputation, size, or patriotism cloud your mission. The market doesn't care who your national hero is. It only punishes those who believe without questioning. Always ask the hard questions, even when the answers make you uncomfortable. Because in investing, as in life, truth often starts as a small, quiet voice in a cheering crowd, but it's the only one that can save you from collapse. Part 5. Lessons on Trust, Greed, and the Media. When the dust of the Wirecard collapse finally settled, people began to look back, not just to find out who was guilty, but to understand how a lie that massive could survive for more than a decade. And the answer, as Dan McCrum said, wasn't just in the accounting books, it was in human nature itself. We want to believe. We want to believe in beautiful stories, in companies that claim to change the world, in CEOs in black suits talking about innovation and the future. And when that belief mixes with greed, it becomes a sweet, addictive drug. Individual investors saw their stocks rise and thought, "I'm smart." Big funds assumed someone must have checked already. The media glorified the company for the clicks, for the image of a European unicorn challenging Silicon Valley. No one really asked questions because asking questions meant risking the chance to profit. That's the tragedy of our time. We choose to believe not because we understand, but because we're afraid to miss out. McCrum later said that during his years of investigation, what shocked him most wasn't the size of Wirecard's fraud, but how the entire system worked together to protect the lie. Some journalists stayed silent, afraid of lawsuits. Financial analysts didn't want to upset corporate clients. Even auditors, the very people meant to represent honesty, looked the other way because the value of a big contract outweighed the value of the truth. Wirecard was just an extreme example of what's happening everywhere. Investment stories hyped by the media, golden opportunities spreading on social networks, life-changing promises wrapped in the shiny packaging of technology. And as always, the losers are those who believe too quickly. That's why McCrum wrote in Money Men, "When the media stops asking questions, the market stops thinking." In investing, trust is necessary, but trust can never replace verification. Greed is instinctive, but if not restrained by reason, it blinds us to the clearest warning signs. And the media, which was meant to protect truth, often becomes a tool to amplify illusion. The final lesson of Wirecard isn't about the money lost, but about a question every investor should ask before putting in a single dollar. Am I investing because I understand or because everyone else is doing it? Because in the world of finance, information is power, but truth is what saves you. And if you don't search for it yourself, don't be surprised when you realize your belief was the very product someone else was selling. The fall of Wirecard wasn't just a story about accounting fraud. It was a mirror, reflecting how trust, greed, and indifference to truth can bring down an entire system, from investors and the media to regulators themselves. And if there's one lesson greater than all, it's this. In investing, truth always has a price. Sometimes that price is losing money, but if you never learn to search for the truth, the price could be losing everything. Peter Lynch, the legendary investor we talked about in the video, Beating the Street, once said, "Investing is not about following the news, it's about understanding what you own." Wirecard collapsed because millions invested without truly understanding what they were putting their faith in. Lynch, on the other hand, beat Wall Street for 13 straight years by doing just 3 things: questioning, researching, and believing only in what he truly knew. If Money Men is a wake-up call revealing the dark side of the market, then Beating the Street is the guiding light, showing us how to survive and even win in a world full of temptation. I'll pin Peter Lynch's book in the top right corner so you can learn how he searched for truth in the numbers and turned it into opportunities others overlooked. And if you found this helpful, don't forget to like and subscribe for more book summaries that sharpen your investing mindset, strengthen your financial habits, and help you take one step closer to financial freedom.